All right, hi everybody. So sorry about that. We started a little bit late. We had a little technical issues, but hey, when does that not happen in our world? So my name's Elaine Duff. I'm the host of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador, and I'm really excited to be here today with a return guest, which is Jenny Feldt, who's the brand ambassador for Grey Goose in Central Southeast, and Benny Hurwitz, who works for Campari as his national brand ambassador for Wild Turkey. So welcome, guys. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me back.
You're very well. I kind of gave Jenny an ultimatum. I was like, "You're coming on my show. I need you." Benny, good to see you again. Benny's having the one technical issues. He will figure that out, but we're gonna keep going. Might be the Jenny show, but Benny's gonna join us where he can. Benny, can I get a hello? Nope. There you go. And then this one has. How are you doing, Benny?
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Elaine. Sorry about the technical difficulty.
There you go. So we're going to ask. So I'm going to start.
Doing great. One of the many
Benny.
challenges of being a brand ambassador, I'm not at home with my. Just saying, not at home. Don't have my internet, so struggling a little bit. Sorry about that.
It's all good. But you're doing your job. You're out in a bar, supporting bars. That's that's how it rolls. All right. So I want to start off with a few questions. I always like to ask this, which is, every brand ambassador role is very different. So Jenny, I'll start with you. What are your specific responsibilities as the Central Southeast brand ambassador for Grey Goose?
So I guess the main responsibility is brand advocacy and education, working with bartenders and the trade to inspire the trade and to I'm sorry, I had someone pop in here. same issues as Benny, but yeah, really educating people on the vodka category as a whole. I like to really consider myself an expert in the category, and versus just kind of teaching people about Grey Goose, which is obviously a huge part of the job, teaching people about the category, which is oftentimes very misunderstood because it is super saturated. So those are the main kind of goals. And in that, every day looks different, whether it's training bartenders, whether it's training bar owners, distributors, our commercial sales team partners as well. That is typically, the largest responsibility, as well as creating cocktails for the brand for different seasons, different occasions, as well as developing programming for our ambassador team. That looks like a variety of different things. There's no 2 days are the same when it comes to being a brand ambassador.
I think that's what most people really like about the job, is that no 2 days is the same. It's always constantly changing. So it's a very, can be a very exciting and dynamic role. Now, when it comes, I do have a quick question before we dive into Benny. When it comes in, because I used to do, I work for Ciroc and I work for Kettle, and we used to do vodka education. So for now, are you doing comparisons of different material, grain types, or what is the main education these days on vodka?
I think it's really just the history of the category from, pre-continuous distillation, what that looked like, how the spirit traveled, from Russia and Poland over to this side of the world, and how it became the number one most consumed spirit in the world, where it kind of still sits today. And just going over the changes throughout time, the definition recently changed for vodka a couple of years ago to remove the odorless, flavorless, colorless part of the definition that really kind of held back, expectations for the liquid itself. And so kind of looking at teaching people how to look at vodka through a different lens and to look at it as the foundation spirit, I think really kind of opens people's minds to the category.
No, absolutely. It's definitely something where people take advantage of it. They think everything tastes the same. They think all that, and they're so ridiculously different once you understand the nuances of the different grains or raw material that is being used. And I'm so happy that they changed the definition, because when you smell a lineup of vodkas, as I'm sure you do very often, they are completely different. Like Ciroc smelled like 7 Up, still does, because it's made from grapes. I could nail that. It's still to this day in any lineup, anywhere in the world. And just one last question. So for you, I know, is the number one drink in my mind, the number one drink for vodka is vodka soda, or is it the martini?
I mean, I think right now we're seeing the Moscow Mule kind of take precedence when it comes to the drink that's most. But yeah, vodsads obviously are pretty popular. But the espresso martini is really on the rise. We're seeing it as like the number 8 most ordered drink in the US right now, which a couple of years ago it wasn't even top 20. So I think the espresso martini is back.
No, yeah, I've definitely seen that. So is that outselling? Because I remember when the Moscow Mule became very popular, and I always laugh because Diageo is not one to jump on trends very quickly. They're not a very fast on their feet. They can't, because it's just too big of a machine. So Smirnoff created the Moscow Mule, and it took us 3 years to jump on the trend. I was like, it's already done. But that's nice that we jumped on board. But are people still drinking the Moscow? I don't see it on menus as much. I do see the espresso martini. So is it the Moscow Mule before the espresso, or is it espresso before the Moscow? You think? Your sound went off.
I think it's changing. It's shifting every 3 months. We see that kind of like jump. The martini is definitely on the rise again, as the vodka martini specifically. But as far as, for the general market trends, I think we're seeing Moscow Mules on a lot of menus.
Yeah. All right. Good to know that's still kind of out there in the world. So it's one of my favorite drinks. It's such a simple drink and so easy to consume. And I got to say, I'm very excited. Is it over here yet? At least my girlfriends, I don't drink as much vodka these days, but the Grey Goose martini in a bottle.
It sure is. Yeah. We launched it this past month, and our perfect rendition of a Grey Goose vodka martini in a bottle, ready to serve. It comes at 35% ABV, so it's still encouraged to try the shake or stir out of the bottle, but that kind of allows the at-home bartender to have some fun and be able to show off for their friends without having to worry about putting vermouth in the fridge, which seems to still be a really big issue for everybody.
Or putting vermouth at all in your vodka martini.
Right.
Exactly. No, I was excited. I was like, that is genius. I'm so glad. And I have a lot of friends who are Grey Goose drinkers. So they are very excited about that. So
Yes.
It's now the easy gift I can bring to their home. All right, Benny, are you with us?
I hope I'm here. I hope you guys can hear me. I heard everything you all said.
Fantastic. I can hear you. So why don't you tell us what your particular role is for, like, what are the responsibilities underneath your role for Wild Turkey?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, apologies for not having the camera on. My internet signal is just super weak. Just one of the struggles of doing this stuff as having a life on the road. So
absolutely. Hey, I'm just glad you were able to make it work. So thank you, Benny.
Me too. But yeah, not too dissimilar from Jenny, surprisingly enough. As we know, brand ambassador can mean a lot of different things for different companies. Mm-hmm. But mine is very highly based on brand advocacy and then education. So just like Jenny, I train all of the internal sales force for Campari on our brands when new hires come in. I train our distributor partners, and then of course the bartenders. That's probably my biggest focus. I do well over 100 bar staff trainings a year. So that's a huge focus, is again, that advocacy part, right? Building that affinity with the bartender community, letting them know why our brands are special, why they're good, remind them about that they're there, get them to try them again, go and
Yeah,
visit
absolutely.
them,
Because Wild
support them.
Turkey's been around for a while. So how are people these days, perceiving Wild Turkey? Like it's, a brand everybody's familiar with, but you might not have had. So the bartender's on board, or is this something you're reintroducing?
So with the bartending community, I mean, we really have no issue there. But, as you point out, the brand's been around for over 80 years. And, bourbon wasn't popular like it is nowadays. Bourbon wasn't looked at in the light of some other premium style whiskeys like single malt scotches, and has been 20 years, has kind of premiumized the category and repositioned to where, bourbons can cost hundreds to thousands of dollars a bottle. Whereas in the past, there was no bourbon above $30, $40. So, it's not really us or our liquid that's changed.
I'm teasing you, Benny. I was like, I heard hundreds of thousands of dollars. I was like, is there one? Right. I mean, I've seen some high price ticket ones on the market. I'm just teasing you.
I wouldn't say not for a bourbon. I wouldn't say hundreds of thousands, but an American rye whiskey sold for $43K in an auction last year. Wow. Linnell's Red Hook Rye. So, I mean, American whiskeys are demanding a premium now, and it's not our products that have changed much. Yes, we are showcasing older age stated products, but it's not our product that's changed as much as it's the way people are drinking are changing. The style of drinking has changed, right? Consumers are sitting, sipping, enjoying, analyzing, looking for those nuances and those flavors in our products that have always been there.
Absolutely. And how are people drinking?
For us, what's that?
As in, how are people drinking it these days? Like, what's the big drink for bourbon these days? Is it the old fashioned, the Manhattan?
I mean, the old fashioned is still leading the way. Yep, I would say old fashioned is definitely leading the way still. But, people are enjoying the spirit neat on the rocks all the time too. And really, again, kind of analyzing the flavors and enjoying the flavors. So for us at Wild Turkey, I mean, it's been great, because we've always made an older aged bourbon bottled at a higher proof. And that's what people want now.
That's fantastic. No, it's great. I was just down in Kentucky last weekend, and a lot of neat bourbon being consumed, and a lot of neat rye, and I saw a lot of consumers just enjoying things neat and drinking flights, and like really getting to appreciate the whiskey as a whole. So it's great to see the category on the rise again, and an iconic brand like Wild Turkey really making its way back into the hearts of the consumer. So I want to talk about, because both of you guys, started as brand ambassador at a new company, right? I want to talk about, it's a question. I brought this question up because I have a lot of conversations with new brand ambassadors, and they're getting hired by smaller brands, and they don't know what to do. Like their first couple of months of the job, it's like kind of like, if you remember what it was like, and that's why I brought it up. I know it's been a while since you guys have been new, but Jenny, you've worked for two different brands, and there's different ways of doing it. I have my theory of how you should start your first month and how I direct people to do it. But, I want to know, what were some tips if you would like to give a new brand ambassador starting at a new company? Because even if you're experienced, every company, as you said, Benny, everybody's job is different. Everybody's role is different. Even at the same company, you can work for a different brand. Everything's different. So for you guys, what do you recommend that a new brand ambassador does, like their first month on the job, to kind of just settle in? And then any valuable lessons you learned when you first started the job that you wish somebody had told you, or you just want to pass along that information. Jenny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think coming from behind the bar and working in all the spaces that I did, moving into brand ambassadorship was really interesting because I really didn't know what that meant. And I don't think I, at that point in time, understood the true differences between a position that's more advocacy focused to now you're seeing a lot of these more sales incentivized brand ambassador roles. And so I think just having a better understanding of the role itself going into it, and then not being afraid to ask questions. I think
Right.
being able to put the ego aside and admit that I'm new to this, I don't really know what I'm doing, and find someone that does know what they're doing, whether that's within your company, obviously, to really truly learn the structure of your company. That was the most beneficial route to go about it. But just asking questions, if you don't know something, which you're not going to know everything, ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. It will only make you better at what you do. And don't fall behind on your admin. I think there's this idea of, it's like the Instagram versus reality. I think I talk to people that don't know anything about our industry and are like, oh my gosh, you're living the dream. Like, this is awesome. You just go out and drink all the time. And it's like, that is 10% of the job. It's really all of the planning and all the behind the scenes. And I know we'll get into that a little bit later, but it's managing your time, managing your expectations, as well as being vulnerable and open to asking for help when you need it.
No, I think it's great advice. I think one of the biggest problems is that there's a lot of people, as you know, there's a lot of small brands out there in the world, and they don't know either. They've never had a brand ambassador before. So any thoughts of your first couple of weeks on the job, like if you've never done it before, what would you recommend? And if they don't know, if you have nobody to ask, you're like, all right, we just hired you, go out there.
And I've seen brands like that where, as a brand ambassador, you really have to be able to understand the story behind the brand, to be able to tell that story and to really capture an audience with that story. And I've seen brand ambassador roles created without even having a story or all of the education materials that are necessary for a brand ambassador to be successful when they're teaching others. And it's, in a position like that, again, I think it comes back to like asking questions, going above and beyond, and being like, I don't know how to effectively do my job without X, Y, and Z. And if that involves now you having the opportunity to create that yourself or create that with, someone a little higher up in the company, that's a great opportunity to like be a part of it.
I think it's good. So advocating for yourself and kind of creating like, okay, this is what I think I should be doing. This is what we're doing. And we're going to figure this out together because you've never done this and I've never done this either. So, and what is the main goal? Generally education and case sales, right? So it's like, okay, let's figure out how that's the best way of doing that. I think that's great advice. Ben, how about you? Any thoughts about somebody just comes onto the job, how do you recommend they approach their first month or two on the job?
Yeah, I mean,
what did you do?
I would definitely agree with Jenny and point out being humble and listening and paying attention, taking notes, because, there's a whole nother lingo on the side of this industry that, isn't really talked about on the bar side. Lots of acronyms, and your company can't expect you to know all that stuff, especially if you are coming straight from a bartender side. If you don't have a business degree or haven't worked at a corporate company, you might not know what half of that stuff means. So really just writing it down when you will feel like I should know this, but you shouldn't. they can't expect you to know everything. So, being not intimidated and being confident and knowing that, hey, I got hired for this job for a reason. I'm good. I have this skill set, but I just don't know what this means. Can someone tell me?
No, I think that is great advice, because there is so much lingo we don't know. I guess let's turn the question around. What would you advise a company to make sure that their brand ambassadors know before they send them out on the streets? Because I'm sure you've seen it. I'm sure maybe you experienced it, where like people are out on the street and they're unprepared because maybe the people they're working for did not give them the information they need. So, Jenny, any thoughts there? Like, if you could recommend the brands, not saying your company, because your company's amazing and they do great training. So any other company out there in the world, like make sure your brand ambassadors have X, Y, and Z before you send them out there.
I mean, and just like any other job in any other industry, it's making sure your employees are set up for success. And that requires proper, efficient but extensive onboarding, and that requires teaching the brand materials, as well as teaching media training, teaching all these different components that go into making a great brand ambassador before you send them out and about. I think that should be the number one priority, instead of just throwing people to the wolves to figure it out. And I again, like, we all see it, and it's like, oh no, like, let me take you under my wing and kind of show you a few things, but that only means so much for another company that doesn't operate the same way that mine does.
Right.
It's being able to teach the foundation of the actual company itself, and how that structure works, how to properly wire with these different components of the business as well, from your sales team to your distributor, as well as to your marketing teams, to your fellow advocacy, if that exists within the company, finding proper channels of communication to set your employees up for success.
No, I think that's great words of advice, because I'm sure you've heard of people, like I've talked to people and they've been put on, literally the second day they're on board, suddenly they're giving a brand education to other people. I'm like, you barely got it. They're like, yeah, I have no idea. I had to read up on the brand, educate myself, and then give a presentation. I'm like, that's just the most stressful thing I have ever heard. But yeah, they get kind of thrown in. Benny, any thoughts? Like, what would you recommend if a brand's bringing somebody on? What's the bare minimum information I guess they should give to their brand ambassador before they send them out in the street?
Well, I was going to say something like more along the lines of, how people say, surround yourself with people that are smarter than you. If you're a small company and you're looking to create a brand ambassador program, but you don't know what that means, you have to find someone that is smarter than you, that has experience either in the field as a BA or has managed BAs before, and who can help put together essentially that handbook of guidelines of ways of working, and outline what each of their specific KPIs are, right? And like, I think to Jenny's point too, it does take time. And to your point, right? Mm-hmm. Don't send somebody out 2 days on the job to do their first staff training. They should have like a week in the office, where one, a lot of these companies are bigger, like the ones that we work for, and they have huge HR and corporate structure where, a week is spent at the corporate headquarters, where you're learning everything about how the company works, even before you learn about how your job works. So I think there needs to be a dedicated time for learning what your role is and what it means, and having that instruction and someone to create those instructions, and having someone in the company with experience.
Absolutely. I mean, it's why I created it wasn't why I was getting this conversation. I just wanted to hear about like what you guys would think a company should teach. Cause I just heard some horror stories to speak of certain people I talked to. I'm like, ouch. Like, they're like, yeah, I'm already in the field talking to salespeople. I've been on the job for a day. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, I don't even know what all my real roles and responsibilities are. I'm like, that's a lot for somebody who doesn't know it. It's why I created the Brand Ambassador Academy, to kind of be that kind of onboarding tool. But it's just, yeah, just having that that take the time for the training. I know you're paying this person, the person's on the clock, but especially for smaller companies, especially for part-time brand ambassadors, a lot of them, they feel like, oh, I want them producing like immediately. I'm like, you need to take that time. They'll produce faster and they'll be more confident if you put in the time and effort to make sure they have everything they need before hitting the streets. But let's jump away from that, because you guys are both former bartenders from DC. Did you guys know each other in DC?
Benny and I go way back, man.
Okay, all right. So you guys are fantastic. Now, Benny, you were at the famous Jack Rose, and Jenny, you were at the Le Diplomats in DC, and you were also a consultant for a restaurant group. What are the skill sets you take away from being a bartender into being a brand ambassador? Because not everybody comes from the same background, but I do think there's a usefulness of being a bartender beforehand. So, Benny, this time I'll start with you. What, from being a bartender and working in a place like Jack Rose, how do you apply those skills, and how does it help you as being a brand ambassador?
Yeah, absolutely. The number one thing that I would say that translates from time working in bars and restaurants to, still working in bars and restaurants, just on the other side, is hospitality. It's number one, right? Like, I think most folks know that and have a big focus on that in their business and in their business's culture, to kind of put hospitality first. So if you keep that mindset, even though you're on the other side of the bar, that it's everything from just like the way you talk to people, the way you approach a conversation, the way you walk into a bar and present yourself, the way you behave. I think a lot of that is really important. Bartenders, bartending in our industry, it's basically a subculture as well. Like when you work as a bartender in this industry, it does consume your life quite a bit. It becomes more than work, it becomes your hobby too. A lot of time your interests, the things that you read and study about, become all cocktail and spirits related when you are at this level, and thinking about doing it for a career. So just remembering how bartenders move and think, and keeping that top of mind, and acting and communicating that way with them, and letting them know that you are essentially one of them, and you did what they did, and you know what it's like, and you can commiserate that. And again, that just goes to how you speak to them, how you set boundaries, and not walk into a bar on a Friday night and try to pitch a product to somebody, right? I think that's the oldest example in the book, but those are things that, coming from the bar side, you already know. That's just in you. You'd never do that, right? So you thinking in the mindset like they do still, and again, reminding them that we're kind of the same. We come from the same place. We get what you're going through. We know you have many brands to choose from, a lot of people, and it's almost like taking a little step back and trying not to be annoying,
Right. No, I think this guy, and I wish I could go through all my podcasts and pull out the number of times that line has been said about like not walking in on a Friday night and pitching the brand. It's it's so funny because it's like said numerous times. I'm like, yep, still happens, but everybody kind of like, yep, that's one thing and it's true. Like having empathy with the bartenders and being able to speak their same language. So I'm assuming that helps you create a deeper bond with them. Like, hey, like, I'm not just trying to pitch my brand. I understand what you're going through. This is why I think it works there. Is that part of the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. Like, speaking the language is a huge part of it. And I think that goes back to the hospitality part too that I mentioned first.
That makes a lot of sense. And Jenny, how do you apply it? Like your skill sets from being a bartender. I mean, do you ever use it to kind of, create cocktail menus and costing things and become part of the team a little bit? Or how do you utilize it?
Yeah, I mean, all of those things, obviously echoing what Benny said, is really being able to put yourself in their shoes before you even have a conversation, And then as you have the conversation, kind of relate, to what their goals are, what they're looking for, what they need. And then, I still am R&Ding and creating cocktails all day, every day. It's a huge part of the job. And so I think being able to come with some new techniques or be able to educate on techniques and showcase like a different outside perspective from what they are experiencing between the same four walls with their team, I think is quite an advantage to being able to talk the talk and walk the walk. I think it also allows you to really understand all different sides of the business as well as multitasking. I think as I kind of alluded to, the first question is like, we wear many hats. No 2 days are the same, which is very similar to no 2 days are the same behind a bar.
Mm-hmm.
For the most part, you never know who's going to walk in, who's going to sit at your bar, how you're going to accommodate and adapt to that particular experience that you're creating for that guest. And I think that is a very unique skill that applies to everything I do as a brand ambassador. Being able to be adaptable, being able to work well with all different types and styles of people, which I think, Benny and I were very fortunate growing up in DC and bartending in DC, where it is a melting pot of all different cultures and all different types of people speaking all different types of languages. I think you really get a full circle perspective of how to work well with people, how to understand people, and therefore how to be able to also help people and create an experience for the bartenders as well.
I've heard that makes a lot of sense. I mean, being able to multitask is definitely an essential skill to being a brand ambassador, and being a bartender, you definitely have to be able to change and be adaptable to whoever's in front of you and the environment and the energy within the room. I wanted to ask actually the both of you, just expanding on this, is obviously after COVID, there is an entire green staff out there in the world. So do you find yourself now being able to use your bartender skills to help people with their bar programs a little bit more? Are people asking that a little bit more, like, hey, I could really use some help because I'm short staff, I don't have these people? Is that just, this is a theory I have, is that must be a great new opportunity for brand ambassadors, but love to hear your thoughts on that. Are you getting those kind of requests?
I think, I can attest to the education is definitely amped up, but it's amped up to a degree of more, not basic level, more foundational education than going into the nitty gritty of like the science behind our distillation process. I think it's really just teaching more category, which has always been a goal of our company. But I think it's an opportunity for more brand ambassadors to be able to be a tool for these different bars and restaurants to get back into the swing of things and make good business decisions. I think a lot of the stuff that we did over COVID was trying to educate bartenders and bar owners on financial responsibility. And, I think there's like a lot of different asks that are being, that are out there now, where it's like, I'm not just teaching on category, I'm teaching on, steps of service. I'm teaching on, hospitality. I'm teaching on, a more vast array of topics than before.
Yeah, no, I feel like it's 2006 again, 2007. Benny, what for you? Are you still there? Because I was gonna say we just lost him. Right there, he is. There you are, Benny.
All right. Yeah, sorry about that. I got dropped for a minute.
No worries at all. I was gonna say, for you, are you getting those requests as well?
Yep,
like Jenny was talking, and what are you getting requested to do?
What was the full question again?
So the full question is, because of COVID, there's a lot of new staff out there in the world. So there's a lot of green staff. Are you now getting more requests to kind of help bars with more fundamentals like classic cocktails and education on. Jenny was saying like steps of service. Like I just feel like it's a new world again. Are you getting those kind of requests as well?
Yeah. Yes, I am actually. And I mean, there's always been those types of requests to an extent. A lot of times we work with national accounts, larger chain accounts that tend to have turnover anyway, but also tend to focus on simpler cocktails, basics, and classics, and often are far more open to recommendations from the brand, right? So, we'd go in and present 4 or 5 cocktails to a large restaurant group that they'll just pick the ones that they want, right? But then to your point of COVID changing the industry quite a bit, there is more turnover just in your cocktail bars and your independent restaurants and smaller businesses. So people are needing a little more of the whiskey 101, bourbon 101. What is bourbon versus rye versus scotch and other types of whiskey? So I mean, I've always tried to sprinkle that into all of my education, but definitely have had more that are primarily focused on those, beginner level kind of foundational information behind how these products are made and what they are, and giving them tips and tools and ways to remember some of the basics.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was suspecting, because I just think this is like the heyday. I mean, because I'll be honest with you, in 2000, when I left being a brand ambassador, was 2015. By 2014, there was nothing new I could teach anybody. Everybody knew. Everybody was up to it. Everybody was nerd out. Like they had been studying. They all took the WSET, their bar 5. Everybody was at the top of their game. And I'm like, wow, I have nothing to like educate anybody on, because you're actually, rotovapping and doing things above and beyond my skills that I just never had any interest in doing. So it's kind of, I would find it, do you find it refreshing, or is it more just like, oh God, I can't believe you don't know that?
No, it is refreshing. It is refreshing because, I've been in my role 5 years coming up. In about a week from now will be my 5-year anniversary. So, and I go to a lot of the same cities I've been going to for these last 5 years. So, it keeps my job exciting and fresh, that I do get to talk to new people in some of the same bars and restaurants that I've always gone to, places that we know are great and they hire good people. But it's just nowadays people coming in with less experience and background knowledge. So it's refreshing. It gets me to get back into those accounts that I have talked to a few times, but they want me to come in again because they have new people, right? As much as I don't want them to have turnover in their bars, it does allow us to come in and do our job and, still help everybody.
No, absolutely. I was going to say, and well, I guess the more nuanced kind of like, is there anything you guys would teach differently? You've been doing this for a long time. So like from 5 years ago, is there anything, obviously not everything was amazing before COVID hit. So like how some people like forgot how to be hospitable, because they got so high up on their horse. Like, I'm so good at my job. You peasants sitting for me should be grateful I give you a drink. I've seen that happen too, where people were like, oh, well, why are you asking me about a Cosmo? How dare you ask for it in this bar? Is there anything you'd like to see change now, like coming forward? Like, that maybe we could change the new generation coming ahead. Is it more about teaching about how to be hospitable and kind and give people a better experience and not to judge? Or I don't know. That's just my own opinion. Jenny, any thoughts? Did you ever see that? Like, have you ever watched a bartender tear down a consumer because they didn't know?
Oh yeah. I work for a vodka brand.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm torn down, some of the times, but I think it really just comes with the nature of working with people. You're going to have, different mindsets and mentalities that you have to learn how to navigate, and that will never change. I think I would say one thing that I've noticed is there is a lot more turnover and people jumping to different places and exploring different options. And it doesn't seem like a lot of these conversations that we started over COVID about, really truly creating structure within bars and restaurants to better help their employees have fully been put into place. So I think that there is this, we're in this opportune moment where it's like we can either, double down and get it done and create these structures within our industry to retain staff, or this is just going to continue to kind of cycle through until we can kind of get our minds and hearts together to create those spaces.
Yeah, that is a great point. That some change definitely, and it definitely was highlighted, it had to happen. That, why is it that, people have to work in jobs but no healthcare or no paid holiday and things of that nature. I have heard, definitely some of those changes being made because new staff are coming aboard and they're demanding things. They're like, if you want me, like, that's great, but this person wants me too. And there's a shortage of staff. So this is what I need. And, I know it's harder for the operators to do it. But if they can do it in Europe, we can figure it out here. Benny, any thoughts?
Sorry, I had lost y'all for a minute there. Could I get the question again?
You know what? It's okay. We'll go to the next one, actually, because I realize we're kind of running short and long on time. I was going to say, and Benny, this is more towards you because off-premise is is part of the role. Jenny, it's not as much as part of your role, but Benny, is it a big part of your role in your job as a national brand ambassador?
It is. I wouldn't say it's the biggest part by any means. It's a small part, to be honest. And even just pre-pandemic, I was specifically just on-premise focused. But when bars were closed, I was very fortunate to still have my job and find ways to adapt and work in the off-premise as well. So since things have stabilized and bars are reopened all around the country, I now do still focus a little time in stores, but when I'm doing that, it's often really just to meet a buyer or somebody. As working for a whiskey brand, we offer private barrels of our product, so sometimes I'm leading a tasting with samples from different barrels for a buyer at a liquor store. Or maybe even, depending on our relationship and history with that store, I may even go there and do a sampling for them if they have that type of clientele that is, a little more knowledgeable about whiskeys and they just don't want any old promo person in their store pouring a product. Sometimes I will still do some store samplings. But really that's the extent of it. I would say most of my focus is on premise still.
Gotcha. Well, when you're going back to like, what type of stores were doing the barrel staves? Is it not mainly just a craft liquor store?
Yeah, so you'll find that it's liquor stores that are definitely more spirit savvy but then also ones that just do a lot of volume, honestly. So sometimes it is the big chains that have stores all over the country. They will get access to barrels. But then a lot of times it is the independents that do maybe focus most of their efforts on whiskey and try to have a very large selection of whiskeys from around the world. And then, those same types of stores will want to work with local bourbon connoisseur groups. Maybe they pick a barrel together and then that barrel, gets a little bit of that whiskey group's reputation on it. And it helps, the product sell for that liquor store. I mean, in many cases, in fact, Like we'll see those types of collaborations, and then a barrel, comes out, put on the floor on a Saturday, and it sells out in a matter of hours. So,
Wow.
yeah, I mean, a lot of time we do work with those craftier stores that have those consumers that are interested, that may or may not know the product super well, but they know the category, they know what they're looking for, they know that those single barrel offerings are special.
Mm-hmm.
And then some.
Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, and then some of the barrels, they do go to bars and restaurants too, but we do see most of them to go into stores since the pandemic.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So they have like a whiskey group or people that kind of come in, and they might have advocates, and they're waiting. So they have a mailing list that they're probably sending out, letting them know that it's coming to the store.
Yeah, so those would be the level of like an off-prem store that I'd probably have more interaction with.
No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's talk about that because, obviously when you're selling in a barrel of whiskey, there's a story, right? Everything has a story that you're kind of selling behind. Like there's a story behind that particular barrel and like what, how long it's been aged, where it was aged. And I'm leading up to the fact that, being a storyteller is really an essential skill to being a great brand ambassador. And it's not an easy skill. It's not everybody has it. It's something I think you have to develop. But I wanted to hear your guys' opinion. What do you believe makes a good storyteller? And then, like, I don't know, what are how you become one? Like, do you consider yourself one, or is it something you're still working on? I mean, I consider you guys both pretty decent presenter. I've seen you guys both present information out there in the world. But Ben, I'll start with you. What do you think makes a great storyteller? Because it is a big part of your job.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is definitely like an innate trait, but it does take practice. I definitely would say I'm far better at it now than I was 5 years ago. But being a good storyteller is a couple things. I would say number one is probably passion for the product that you're telling the story about, right? Knowing that story front and back, obviously, but people can hear it in your voice when you're reciting something versus like talking about something and something that you lived and something that you experienced, right? So it does take time, I think, to develop because, we talk about these brands, but the way that we paint in the story element comes from our lived experience and interaction with our brand. So my trips to Kentucky, the nights that I have camped at Wild Turkey Distillery, I've had breakfast with Jimmy and Eddie Russell. I've stayed at Eddie Russell's house before. Like having these experiences with my brand and the family behind the brand that makes these products and, has only developed my story and my ability to tell it over the years. But it may be something that you are really, really good at right away. But for me, it took a little time to really hone it in, I'd say.
No, those are great points. I think personal experience is probably the most valuable thing as a brand owner you can give to your brand ambassador, to be able to really talk from experience, because nothing is more authentic than when you can say you've done it or smelt it or tasted it or been there with somebody. So I think those are great points. Jenny, you?
Yeah, I think it's just really practice. I know for me, going into brand ambassador world, you're given all of these educational tools. I mean, you should be, as we kind of talked about, given all these educational tools, and you want to remember every little word and every little detail and every little moment. And then when you do that, it takes away from really being able to like put yourself into the story as you need to evoke an emotional investment from the people listening to your story. And that's really what makes a good storyteller, is to be able to relate with your audience and to involve them. And you can do that by suspense or, that cliffhanger, or also you can do that through empathy, generating empathy, and showcasing genuine generosity, building trust between you and the audience. And that involves being vulnerable. If you slip up, own that.
Yeah.
and don't stress over it. I think that's another tactic to good storytelling is if you trip up, it's okay to admit that you tripped up and go back and be like, oh, I don't know why I messed that up. Like it'll be a part of people understanding that you are genuine in what you are saying and in the stories that you are telling. I think the best advice that I learned when kind of really learning functional storytelling were believe you're a good storyteller. Like once you, and you know, half of what we do is internal. When it comes to if you believe it, you can do it. Like I really believe that I'm a good storyteller. Therefore, maybe I'm not today, but we'll get there. Like those affirmations that you can tell yourself and invest in your own in yourself to becoming a good storyteller. I think the other one is writing down your stories in your own voice. As I said, you know, you're oftentimes given these tools with scripts and whatnot. I think being able to take and pick out what speaks to you and stands out to you and choose to tell those stories, that's where the passion will shine through. You don't have to go through every single point and every single you know, bullet point to really be able to tell a good story. It has to mean something to you. And then another one is don't use PowerPoint. And I think, you know, there's two different ways of using PowerPoints, whether it's like pictures, which I think can be impactful. But if you have, you know, everything that you're saying on a bullet point behind you, it's very distracting to the people you're telling the story. You know, they're looking to like write down all this stuff and not even listening to you. So making sure you're creating an environment where your story can be heard. And there aren't distractions. And that's also being able to manipulate the environment as well, which we don't always have the opportunity to do. But if you do have that opportunity to do it. And then, yeah, it's just practice, like practice in front of people. I think going back to like what should companies invest in their onboarding programs? It's teaching how to storytell, but also practicing in these like one-off, you know, workshops where you can actually practice with your peers, practice for your manager, practice for your friends, like record yourself. I think those are probably all of the tips that really helped me become a fantastic storyteller. You know, at first I remember, you know, really wanting to learn word by word what I should be telling when it came to the brand story, and I was like sweating and like really nervous. And I remember the first time ever presenting I got a group of friends and family together at Benny at 5 to 1 back in DC, and you know, had everyone, my mentors, sitting in front of me and listening to me, and they were like, Jenny, like, that's not you. Like, this is not you. Like, we know you know all this stuff, but tell it with your voice. And that was the biggest takeaway I had in moving into brand ambassadorship was being able to digest information and tell it with your own genuine personality and voice.
No, it's really great. It's a really great insight and really great perspective, because you really can't, and going to practice, you need to understand the information well enough that you can tell it in your own voice. So you do need to understand and observe it, but you never have. It's something I had to learn too. It's like I had to learn, oh my God, it's okay if I didn't hit every point. You know, find the 3 key points that you're supposed to say, and everything else is a bonus add. But there's 3 points generally for every presentation. If you get those 3 across, you're good. Like, you know, for Ciroc, you know, if I just made sure everybody knew that Ciroc was the first vodka ever made exclusively from grapes from France, I was good. Like, that's all I really need to get a point. Everything else is a bonus. And it was a great lesson I learned, because same thing like you, Jenny. I was giving a presentation and it wasn't me. Like, everybody came to like, what happened to you? Like, you're, you know, I'm usually very funny and very casual. I might drop an F-bomb here and there. which I don't highly recommend, but I'm a little more, I'm very passionate about things I speak about. But it was about a subject, I had to read a script. And I was like, if you make me read this script, unfortunately, my personality is just going to disappear. Like it was about responsible drinking. And I was like, this is I was like, I am a big fan of responsible drinking, but the way the script is read, it's written, I was like, it's just not how I would normally speak. So I lost all my personality, and it was the most boring thing I've ever done. And they were probably bored listening to me on the other side. So I think that is very true. Very big thing. Being passionate, as you said, Benny, and then learning your own voice and coming across it in your own way is probably a very valuable thing. And then knowing there's probably 3 or 4 key points you have to say, learn what those are, and everything else, it's like, just don't say anything that's not true. Everything else, just like talk about it with passion. Because God knows I've said some things that weren't true because I thought I was very confident that was the right answer. I forgot. And I was like, I'm just going to say this. And I realized, I should have just not said anything at all.
And then there's that one person
that calls you
out.
Yes. Don Lee was very good at calling me out on stuff a lot. So, but I learned from him. I was like, you know what? From now on, I just should not say it. If I'm not 100% sure, just don't say it at all. But really, really great points. All right. We're getting up on the hour. I know we started a little bit later. But there is 2 more questions I want to ask the 2 of you. And one is because you both travel a lot of markets, right? And maintaining your network is a very big thing, right? So maintaining it, building relationship with bartenders so that they become a fan of you personally, and also they become an advocate of your brand. So what are some things that you use? I know social media is a big one. We all friend somebody, whatever it is. But Benny, you mentioned something about like before you go into a market, you kind of look people up. I would love you to expand upon that, like how you use Facebook, and then also what are some other tactics you use to just kind of maintain those relationships and kind of deepen them over the years. Benny, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, we did chat about this before, and
yeah.
I kind of figured this out on my own, and people may know this, but I've realized that when you go on Facebook and you change the city that you live in, like current city, you can then filter all your friends by your current city. And then obviously you can do the right precautions so that it doesn't pop up on your feed and look like you actually moved to that city. So I'm just like basically constantly changing the city I live in on Facebook. And that's pretty much the only thing I use Facebook for these days anyway. So I never really change it back, but if I'm going somewhere, I'll change it to Austin, Texas, and then I could filter friends by current city. And then it's like, here's all the people that I know, somebody I forgot to hit up, or someone I haven't seen in a couple visits.
I love that. I found out, I was like, I did not realize you could do that. So that was one tidbit I'm taking away from there. It's like, because I always wondered how that works. So that's a really great fact of life. I love that. Anything else you do before you're going into a city, or how do you maintain, like you're a national brand ambassador, when you meet bartenders, what are some of the things you do to kind of maintain that network, or, deepen the relationship from the, hour you might've spent with them afterwards?
Yeah. So we talk about big part of the role being engagement and advocacy. And part of doing that is hosting bartender events, whether they be dinners or happy hours, to, taking bartenders on a field trip to something related to your brand or process, right? So when I'm creating an experience like that and I'm inviting guests, I'm trying to retain information as well, right? Who RSVP'd, who actually showed up.
Oh, you cut out
right
there.
So another tool I use is just Google. Like literally takes, if you can hear me now,
Yep.
Google Google Forms are super easy to create in minutes, and you can collect everything from somebody's name and email address to the bar they work at and their t-shirt size, right? And have all that information going into your event, and then again tracking it, who showed up, right? Who brought somebody else, who was that person, get their name. So then you have these lists essentially rolled up into some spreadsheets that you can look back on and say, oh, this person comes to all my events. Let me make sure I invite them because I know they're going to show up, right? And keeping connected with people that way. It is certainly challenging. Like, you're not going to get to see all the people you want to see or friends in every city you go to. So it's just, you know, also using social media kind of as a platform to announce, hey, I'm coming to town, even though you're not, you know, directing it at any one specific person.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I love the Google Sheets as well. The fact that you can ask a lot of questions to your events and gather their information and find out where they are. But I never even thought about it. It's like looking who comes to all my, who keeps coming and returning, and how can I make this person like an advocate that tells other people, which I think is a really clever thing. Jenny, how about you? How do you maintain, you work in a couple of cities. What do you do to kind of maintain your network and kind of deepen those relationships with bartenders?
I think it is just that follow-up. I think it allows, as a brand ambassador to be really successful in what you do is to always follow up. And that could mean like a week later, like, hey, like it was so great to see you, at my dinner or such and such last week. Like, what did you think? Like getting some like real feedback and engaging and kind of like involving them in the process. I mean, the bartenders that we work with and the trade that we are engaging are an extension of our brand. And so it is like really being able to continue conversations going, even when you're not in market. And I think I definitely use tools. I think I used to use Facebook a lot more, where I'd, check in and be like, coming in hot to, Nashville. I'll be here for X amount of days. Like, what's everyone doing? I think I've filtered that more so to like my Instagram stories. I just feel I've always gotten better and more engagement that way, with bartenders. And so, yeah, it's just continuously like reaching out and keeping notes and recaps and making sure everyone's names, writing them down. I think, I'm oftentimes, every time I meet a bartender and I have someone make me a drink, I connect with them on Instagram. I'll like take a picture of them and I'll post them to my story, and I'll be like, a perfect martini stirred by, what's your Instagram handle? And then that kind of helps me, have them in my my repertoire for the next time I'm in that market. Or, they can always reach out to me on Instagram and follow up as well. So it's it can go both ways.
No, I love that. And promoting somebody else is always a great way of building that relationship, because you're using your own platform to build somebody else's platform. It is a really great, it's good for them. It's good for you. It kind of just shows that you're invested in them as a person, which is fantastic. Well, to wrap this up, I always like to end on one question, which is basically, what is a valuable lesson that you've learned in your career that you would like to pass along to another brand ambassador that might be coming in? And it can't be about loving your brand, because that's an obvious one, and getting your expenses in. So anything beyond that, because I know those two are a given for anybody listening. Those are two things that you need to you should love your brand, and you should definitely get your expenses in. Number like I think number 1 and 2 rule, if not on equal par. Benny, what if you want to start with what's a valuable lesson that you've learned?
Absolutely. So I first off just want to say again, thanks Elaine for having me on. I would love to do this again when I have better internet.
I would love to have that as well.
Also, as we speak, my computer is now on 5%. So to close it out, what I'll say is just being patient.
Oh, and you cut out.
Patient.
Yes,
letting your passion rush. A brand ambassador, don't necessarily just take a job because it's the title. Make sure it's the brand.
That's it. Add to Benny's thing. Make sure when you're doing an interview, you're in a
that
place
you
with
care
really good
about.
Wi-Fi.
Otherwise, it's not.
Benny, we're losing you. All right. Well, Benny goes off, I think, until he reconnects. I'm going to have Jenny. Jenny, what is the valuable lesson you have?
I think, time management and really investing into yourself, making sure that you're dedicating at least 1, if not 2 days a week to yourself and your own personal life. Our jobs as brand ambassadors are not normal schedules. We're not forced, but we work weekends and nights, and I think oftentimes as a new brand ambassador, you really want to hit the ground running and be everywhere at once and do everything and look at me. And I am definitely guilty of that. But really knowing and being selective and learning how to say no when certain opportunities cross your path, to make sure that you're leaving space for your own mental health in order to be the best version of yourself. And again, that's advice that exists across every industry and every type and style of job, is make sure you're making time for yourself. But I really think that, as brand ambassadors, we are often seen as we're having to put on a show, even show up on days that maybe we're not feeling our best, and have a smile on and always taking care of other people. Just make sure that you're also fueling your own fire and taking care of yourself.
Absolutely. I think that's great words of advice. Taking care, because you're working 24 hours a day. And I know you're, a mom, and that's a whole nother layer of making sure you're taking care of your family. That is definitely something to take care of. And to, as an example that Benny had, make sure if you're doing an interview, you're in a place with good Wi-Fi and a quiet environment, and you have a charger. Always when you're doing any sort of media, make sure you're well prepared. I'm just teasing you, Benny, but wise words of advice to tell anybody, because these things can happen. We lost Benny because he lost his Wi-Fi and his phone died. But anyway, this was fantastic. It was interesting anyway. We managed to make it through. So Jenny, thank you so much. Great to see you again.
Likewise.
And Benny, wherever you are on Austin, it was good to have you on. And for all of you listening and watching, thank you so much for tuning in. This is episode 67 of Celebrating the Brand Ambassador. So whatever you missed, this will stay on Facebook and YouTube and then linked for the next 2 weeks. And then you could always find it on my website, Duff on the Rocks. So, and eventually it turns into a podcast, so you can find on your favorite podcast channel. Until then, Jenny, have a great weekend. And I'm sure we'll be chatting soon.
Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Elaine. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Bye.